When I graduated college, I was about 24 years old. I really wanted to get out on my own and try living alone. Luckily for me, my grandma had asked to be moved into an assisted living center about a year prior. I had asked my parents if I could live there. They talked it over with my grandma, and she agreed it would be nice to have someone there after a year of it, sitting empty. This was in a kind of up-and-coming area, but still had its rough spots. I was so excited until I got there to do a walkthrough to see how I was going to set up my things. The house was a shotgun-style home with a cellar that could only be accessed from the outside. While I was walking through the house, I swore I was hearing noises. Finally realized they were coming from the basement. Called the police, and they came out and escorted out 6 people from the cellar. They were squatters that had been living there. After they left, I went down there to find all kinds of stuff. It looked like someone had spray painted the walls all over. It was just a concrete cellar where the water heater and HVAC was, so I wouldn't have really cared, except it seemed to be kind of satanic. I don't know anything about that stuff, but there were a couple of pentagrams and a chalk circle on the floor. Cops didn't really have anything to say about it. They didn't know either. I poured some water on the floor to wash away the circle, but the walls, I just left as is. Fast forward a few months of me living there. I had forgotten all about it. Had started dating my future wife, and she was over. A knock came from the back door. I ignored it, but it came again. It was 1 a.m., and this was my back door. Someone had to have come into my backyard by opening the fence gate. Some guy was standing on the porch. I opened the interior wooden door, but kept the outside storm door shut and locked. I asked what he was here for since it was so late. All he said was, "Is Christina here?" I told him he had the wrong house. He just stood there staring at me. I was getting very nervous at this point and shut the door. He walked down the steps and just stood in my backyard staring at the house. Then he tried to open the cellar doors. I had them padlocked and he gave up. I opened the back window and told him to get out of here before the cops show up, or he gets shot, or both. Again, he just stared, but then finally left. I didn't sleep that night. Again, a couple months later, my girlfriend told me that guy was back, just standing in my backyard staring at the house. This time it was in broad daylight. I called the cops this time. He tried the cellar doors again, but left before they showed up. The next day I went down to the cellar to see if maybe there had been something left behind, but found nothing. It was just a damp, disgusting cellar with a dirt floor. I have zero idea why he wanted in there. I highly doubt the satanic stuff had anything to do with it. It just made this creepier. I unfortunately had to move out sometime later as I could no longer afford it. Never saw the guy again. To the man who followed me to the park. I am currently a 21-year-old female. I have lived alone since I was 18. When I was around 18 or 19, I would often take walks to a park that wasn't too far from my apartment complex. I had a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend now, at the time, who was a couple months older than me, but unfortunately was at work when I decided to go out for my walk. I should mention now that there is a bus stop at the left end of my street that wasn't too far from the park. I remember stopping at the end of the block, waiting for cars to let me pass. Then, I, for some reason, looked over at the bus stop and saw a man staring me down. After noticing this, I really didn't care if the cars would let me pass or not. So, I just walked into the road. I did almost get hit, but I just wanted to be far away from that guy. There was a high school that was probably 5-10 minutes away from the park. I remember looking back at the school because it was a school I was currently attending at that time. Then I saw that the man who was staring me down from the bus stop was following me. I started slightly panicking. I think I even texted my ex-boyfriend about how I'm pretty sure I was being followed. I kept looking back behind me and made sure there was a good sizable distance between him and I. I knew if I would have slowed my pace, something bad was going to happen. I eventually got to the park and started getting really anxious. My reasons being, 1, the park entrance was down a hill and split into 2 separate paths that you couldn't see into due to trees simply being in the way. 2, knowing that nobody would have been able to see what could have happened to me if I chose to go down one of the 2 paths. 3, I was off from work and school that day, and it was 2 p.m., which typically meant nobody was in the park around that time. As I started walking down the winded hill, I saw a woman with 2 kids and a dog. I remember the instant relief, furthermore. The safety I felt when seeing her. I even picked up my pace to get to her quicker, because I was scared out of my mind. I still remember the exact conversation I had with her to this day. "Hi, I know this may seem weird, but I live down the hill, and while I was crossing the intersection where the bus stop was at, I noticed him staring at me, then started following me. Can you just act like you know me if this man comes down here?" Before she could even reply, I tilted my head up to the man, who was about to come down the hill. When I did that, I think he slightly panicked and started walking away. She saw the seriousness of the situation and gathered her kids up into the stroller. I don't know what made him decide to do this next, but as she was trying to get things packed up, he at some point turned back around and was now coming down the hill. I told her that he was coming down, and the woman moved quicker than ever to get things packed up, and I even started helping. As he walked up to us, he immediately started trying to ask me questions. I can't remember what all he said, but I remember the woman was pretty much answering for me. I guess he had tried to ask if we knew each other, which of course she lied by telling him she did know me, and I was coming down to walk back with her. I do know I backed her up with this claim. I just wanted that guy to leave me, and now her alone. He asked us a couple more questions, and eventually we excused ourselves and started our way back up the hill. I remember the woman I had met walked with me all the way down to the intersection where the bus stop was across from. She was clearly very scared for me due to the fact the guy had eventually started following me and her back. I felt so bad for dragging her into that situation. I didn't know if he would try to follow me all the way back home if we broke off there, or if he would decide to aim new focus onto the woman who was just simply at a park playing with kids she was babysitting. Before he could get too close to us, I walked over to some construction workers whom were now working on the high school sign. I explained the whole situation to them and told them about how we thought it was weird, how the man who was initially just following me was now following me and the lady. I pleaded them to call the cops if he went past the bus stop or started following the lady. The construction workers happily agreed, then the woman and I went on our own ways. I don't know what happened to that man. I don't know if he was arrested or not. However, an hour later, my ex-boyfriend had gotten home from work. We went out to go run errands, and as we were driving up the hill, there were 4 police cars parked around the intersection, where I told the construction workers to call the police if the man was still trying to follow me. I'm just glad the police were called, especially with a high school being so close. I couldn't have forgave myself if he had tried to follow some poor high school kid just walking home. So, to the man who was wearing a red and blue puffer jacket, who decided to follow me to a place I would go to that I considered peaceful, content, and safe, thank you for teaching me to be more aware of people, but let's not meet ever again. This happened some years ago during my sophomore year at the University of Michigan. It was during finals week, and I was down on campus studying for the multiple exams I had that day. After studying in a local coffee shop, RIP Espresso Royale, I decided to hunker down in one of the academic buildings, Mason Hall, to use the computer lab printers. First, however, I needed to make a detour to the bathroom. As finals had started and lectures had ended, the campus was in a liminal state. Everywhere was empty, except the bustling main study areas. Thinking I could use this to my advantage, I took the elevator to the 4th floor to use the restroom that I thought would be the quietest. Blasting music in my earbuds, I walk in, see that it appears empty, and hop into a stall to do my business. Everything is going well as I scroll on my phone, at this point having put my earbuds away. Then I notice commotion 2 stalls to my right of the stall opening. After an weirdly long minute or so, I finally see a figure pass my stall. He walks towards the exit in this U-shaped room, only to return after what sounded like getting a view of the sink side of this room. Finishing up in my stall, I then watch this man enter the stall diagonal to me. He holds the door at a 45-degree angle open and peers around at me. Now I am sitting there, just trying to process the middle-aged man seemingly trying to peep at me. I tried to ignore him and just wait him out. He just stayed, staring. He then began shifting around as if he was trying to adjust his view. Annoyed, I ended up saying, "Is there something I can fucking do for you?" Hoping to get him to leave. Nope, he still sits there peering around this door. I then say, "What the fuck are you doing?" No response, just his glare. At this point, he begins shifting around the stall area, entering other random stalls and roaming the area in between both sets of stalls. The whole time looking at me through the crack of the door. At this point, my anger has turned into fear. Fear to open the stall and come face to face with whoever is brazen enough to do this. Something about his movements and unrelenting stare made me feel like I was some type of prey to him. Around this time, I begin contemplating calling someone or calling DPSS. Thankfully, though, someone then walks into the bathroom. The creep then immediately leaves the stall he's posted up in and leaves the room. Hoping he's gone, I begin to put on my bag to then hear the door open, close, then open again. In the moment and looking back, I'm pretty sure that this was the creep coming back. As I hear the sink turn off, I recognize this as my best chance to get the hell out of there. Walking out with the student, I don't mention the experience, and I am just focused on getting away from that restroom. My plan was to go down 1 floor the 3rd and call DPSS. Flustered, I head down. Thankfully, there was no sign of him. Coming out the doors of the north stairwell, I plop down on the bench, take a little breather, and begin dialing the number. Yet, before I could hit call, I see the creep walk through the same stairwell I came from. He's at a speed-walking pace. Right as he sees me, though, he stops outside doorway. He then begins a far calmer and casual walk down the hall past me. As he does, he stares at me and peers into empty classrooms. Spooked, I spring up and begin jogging down the stairs. As I descend, I call the police. I explain the whole situation to the dispatcher as I move swiftly down the stairs and down the hall to the main lobby of the building. Being on this first floor makes me feel far better, as there's a decent crowd. I end up sitting below the staircase, in the lobby, next to a vending machine area. I finish my call and am told to wait for an officer to arrive. I sit there relieved being around other people. But like clockwork, I see him again. I get a good view of him this time as I am a bit calmer. He had a beard and wore work boots, cargo shorts, and tucked-in t-shirt. Not a normal look for someone his age roaming a college campus. As he walks down the hall from the stairs I had just ran down, he stops at the vending machine area looking around. I bow my head and watch through my periphery in an attempt to blend in more. After about a minute of him scanning the room, he walks away. Shortly after, the cop arrived. He essentially tells me that there's no way he'll be able to find this guy, but he'll take a look at the bathroom anyway. Annoyed, I take his card and leave. I end up taking a convoluted route to the undergraduate library through the grad library, my hopes being to prevent the creep from seeing me in the open diag. As I get into the undergrad library lobby, I sit down staring at the door, fully expecting the creep to walk in again. Thankfully, he makes no appearance. Have you ever met Karen? No, I'm not talking about your average everyday busybody or pain in the neck. I'm talking, of course, about the origin of the name. Most people these days agree on one thing about her. Whoever she is, she's been there since the very beginning. When the first White Castle food stand was founded in 1921. Legend goes that on that day, one Karen Mayer began an obsession. It was the first hamburger she'd ever tasted, and for the rest of her life, until she grew up of old age, she dedicated herself to eating fast food every single day. She became a sensation, beloved by owners, customers, and workers alike. So why, you may ask, do we say the name Karen with such disdain and sometimes fear in the fast food industry? And what does a woman dead long before 2025 have to do with any of this? You see, they say obsession is unhealthy for you. We've always been warned that. And Karen, it seems, if you ask the right person, has taken her obsession to the grave. Unfortunately, it's a different world these days. Fast food has become commercialized, the meat more processed, and the customers more vicious. Unfortunately, I know firsthand how this has affected the entity we in the industry call Karen. I wasn't like most people. Instead of working through high school and college, I got my first job at 24 years old. I was green-nosed and ready to join the workforce after having studied my parents' money and my time away at the local college. But as we all know, the job market remains awful, and I soon found myself as the latest cashier at my local Burger King. I'll skip the boring details of the job. If you've worked any form of food service, you know how it goes. I considered myself lucky to have a great manager and team to make it more tolerable. Several years later, I had worked my way all the way to general manager. My family, girlfriend, and my teammates couldn't have been prouder. And stepping into my office that first night was a feeling of pride in and of itself. Then I read the management binder. I already hear where your mind goes. A bizarre list of rules, right? Instead, hidden among the many prep lists, scheduling, and the like, I found a warning. If you see this woman, call 855-827-3727. She looked wholly unremarkable on the surface, but what did stand out? I couldn't tell at the time if it was a joke or not, but simply laughed it off, especially when I read the bottom. Do not engage. This is the part of the scary movie where, if you have sense, you run. I dealt with my fair share of difficult customers, and the last thing I cared about was some temperamental old woman. After all, that first day I had 2 call-outs, and my welcome party had ended up being working the graveyard shift alone. Now, if you've ever worked at Burger King, you'd know that we close our lobby at 10 p.m. I'd been cleaning up the broiler at nearly 3 in the morning when I heard an impossible sound from the lobby. A loud, angry cough. Startled, I decided to check to make sure my district manager was not looking for a surprise visit. But upon entering cashier stand, I saw her. The woman from the photo. She stood 5'4" and presented herself as an older woman. Her clothes were dated, like from a complete other time period dated. And something about her put me immediately at unease. She didn't waste time with pleasantries or an explanation of why she was there. She only spoke that all too familiar phrase, "I want to speak to your manager." By now, I was convinced this was someone's idea of an elaborate joke. After all, I'd locked the doors myself that night, and I knew only the DM, my new assistant manager, and myself had the keys. I am the manager. She seemed to stare at me for a long time, as if I had broken her. She didn't move, didn't speak. Hell, I don't think I even saw her blink. She just stared. Our lobby closes at 10. If you'd like to continue this conversation, you'll need to go through the drive-thru. When I tell you I still see the smile she gave me in my nightmares, to this day, I mean it. 3 of her teeth were missing, and her tongue appeared a charcoal black. But what was worse was the blood that trickled just faintly down her chin only a minute before the lights above her began to flicker. I nearly jumped a foot in the air as we plunged into darkness. It only lasted a second, but when they came back on, the woman was gone. On the counter instead sat a moldy, wet takeout bag that smelled so foul I nearly gagged. I didn't want to look inside, but the more pungent it became, the more a feeling of dread crossed over me and compelled me to it. What I saw inside made me call the number on the photo and lock myself inside the office the rest of that night. Not that it helped very much, as the next few hours could be described as hell on earth. For me, I could hear her cackles all around me, a sound so scratchy and wicked beyond anything I'd heard before. And when I didn't hear her, I saw her, smiling at me through the office's singular window. No matter what she did, though, the same phrase repeated over and over in my head. I want to speak to the manager. By the time whoever I called arrived, I was in the corner of the room. A babbling, incoherent mess of a man. And Karen was long gone. 2 men in nondescript black suits and carrying a skeleton key opened the office door and got me to my feet. And to this day, I still don't know who they were. They didn't offer me their names either, never even said who they worked for. Instead, they had only one question for me. Did you speak to her? It was all I could do in that moment to tremble and point to the bag still sitting atop the counter. The older of the 2 men upturned his nose, but slowly approached it and with a gloved hand opened it up. I expected shock, disgust, anything but what came next. The man simply frowned, turning his blue eyes to his younger partner. God damn it. It's Reggie. Reggie, as I'd learned in the hours that followed, was the last general manager on staff. I'd been told he'd been let go after he'd left the store overnight and refused to return any calls from his store or the district. They'd all assumed he'd ghosted, left for greener pastures, until the bag containing his severed head was left on my countertop that night. The 2 men sat me down and explained I was being let go for my own safety. And frankly, if the present I'd been left was any indication, I'm glad to hear it. It came with a beautiful severance package and all expenses paid therapy, which is more than most people can say they've walked away from a fast food job with. While having my exit interview, I took a chance on asking my district manager for answers. That's how I was told the story of Karen Mayer, a woman long dead, who to this day pays a visit to her favorite food chains. We don't know what she wants. We just know if you talk to her, even acknowledge her. He paused, taking a drag of his cigarette as we stood out by the trash cans that morning. Bad shit happens. You're a lucky bastard, Michael. Not many people live through it. That's why we've made a point of pointing out any potential Karen we see. It keeps the casualties low. It's been a few decades now, but every time I see those Karen videos, I can't help but feel a cold chill run up my spine. I never did set foot in another fast food joint again. My nerves completely shot and my fear too great. Until last night. The things you do for your kids, right? Sean had been crying for a Happy Meal all month, and it was his birthday. How could I say no? I entered that McDonald's and told myself it was so long ago. Nothing bad could possibly happen. I'd been halfway through my Big Mac when I heard a familiar voice. I want to speak to the manager. My blood ran cold as I turned to the cashier stand, where some poor soul stood, blank face staring back at the voice's owner. My son probably thinks I'm insane, having picked him up right there and then, fleeing for both of our lives. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as there is a fast food chain out there, I'll probably never be safe. So if there's one piece of advice I'd give to all you managers out there, read your manual. Keep your eyes peeled. And whatever you do, if someone who looks like a Karen asks for the manager, do not engage. The tall man in my basement. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick and stale. His features were long and slender, limbs stretched unnaturally. His arms hung low, fingers almost grazing his knees. His legs, thin and bone-like, made him stand at an impossible 12 feet tall. His mouth stretched wide, too wide, an unnatural stretched mouth that revealed nothing but a black void inside. His eyes, deep and hollow, were pits of endless darkness, a void that seemed to pull everything in. I don't remember how it got there or how it even got inside. All I know is I locked it deep in my basement where it couldn't come out. Well, that was until I found the basement door wide open. "Hello," I said, staring into the dark basement that yawned open before me. My voice felt small, swallowed by the shadows below. Fear crawled up my throat, thick and sour, like I might throw it up. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. Then I heard it. Soft, rattling noises from the kitchen. Gentle, deliberate, like something was moving in there. The creature from my basement stood at the sink, its towering frame hunched awkwardly beneath the ceiling. It stared out of the window, motionless, its long, slender limbs hanging at its sides. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there like it belonged. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted for the front door. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. The roar came first, splitting the air like a thunderclap. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was deep, raw, and wrong, vibrating through my bones, rattling my teeth. My legs nearly gave out from the sound alone, but fear shoved me forward. I hit the door hard, bursting into the cold night air. My car was just ahead, parked in the driveway. My keys. I needed my keys. My hand dove into my pocket, fingers trembling as I fumbled them out. Behind me, the door exploded open with a splintering crack. Heavy, unnatural footsteps pounded against the ground fast, too fast. I didn't have to see it to know it was coming. I reached the car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hands shook so badly the keys slipped from my fingers and hit the floor mat. No, no, no. I grabbed them again, forcing the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed. The sound of death. The creature lunged from the doorway, its long, bony limbs propelling it forward in a blur of twisted movement. It was nearly to the car. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires squealing as I stomped the gas. The car jolted backward, throwing me against the seat as the creature lunged, just barely missing the hood. Its empty black eyes locked onto mine for a split second, burning into me before I peeled out of the driveway. I didn't stop. My foot stayed pressed to the floor, the car flying down the long, dark street. The night swallowed everything around me, but I didn't care where I was going, as long as it wasn't back there. Days passed. I barely slept, holed up in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The room smelled like old cigarettes and stale air, but it didn't matter. It had 4 walls and a locked door. Every night I checked the window, just to be sure. That night was no different. I pulled back the curtain, heart already racing before I even looked. The parking lot below was empty, streetlights flickering weakly against the dark. Then I saw it. Beyond the lot, past the stretch of cracked asphalt and the rusted chain-link fence, the woods began. And there, just at the edge where the trees met the night, it stood. The tall, twisted figure. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It only stared, watching me from the shadows. It found me. In an instant, I yanked the curtain shut, heart slamming against my ribs. My breath came in quick, shaky bursts. I sprinted to the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside, was empty, still, and quiet. I didn't know how fast it was. I didn't know how smart it was, but it found me. Hours crawled by. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate tapping. My head snapped toward the door, dread sinking like a cold weight in my chest. Who the hell could that be? I slid off the bed, feet hitting the floor. Before I reached the door, I heard it. A voice. Hello? I need help. Help me. Help me. I need help. Help me. It didn't sound right. It was flat, robotic, like a bad recording played over and over. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police, I shouted, voice trembling. Help me. I need help. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. It wasn't even yelling. Just that same lifeless, droning tone. My hands fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, fingers shaking so hard I almost hit the wrong numbers. The voice stopped. My stomach twisted. It was like it knew. The operator answered. I explained everything. The voice, the knocking, the thing in the woods. We'll send someone, they said, but it might take a few hours. A few hours. My heart sank. I didn't hang up. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, waiting. Out of fear, I asked, Could you just stay on the line until they come? I don't want to be alone. At first, she hesitated. I'm sorry, sir. We can't do that. We have to answer other calls. Please, I cut in, my voice trembling. Okay, I'll stay. Relief washed over me, but it didn't chase the fear away. My eyes stayed locked on the door. Her voice was calm, gentle. My name's Rachel. What's your name? I swallowed hard. It's James. All right, James, I'm here with you. You're not alone. Thank you. I think it's still out there. Can you still hear the voice? She asked, softly. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, it stopped when I called you. But the way it sounded, it wasn't normal. It was like robotic, repeating itself over and over. You're doing great, James. Just stay with me. The officers are on their way. I nodded again, trying to steady my breathing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet wasn't a good thing. James, who's chasing you? Can you describe them? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I don't know. It's tall, really tall. Its arms are too long. Its mouth. My voice trailed off. Too long? Rachel asked gently. No, it's not a mask. It's not human. The line went quiet for a moment. James? She said slowly, carefully. Are you sure? Could it be someone in a costume, maybe? I know what I saw, I snapped. My voice echoed off the hotel walls, and I flinched at how desperate I sounded. Okay, I believe you. You're doing great, James. Just stay with me, all right? My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. My eyes stayed locked on the door. I couldn't tell her the truth, not all of it. If I said a monster crawled out of my basement and followed me to a hotel, they'd think I lost my mind. Maybe I had. But the thing outside? The voice? It wasn't in my head. It was real, and it wasn't gone. An hour passed in what felt like seconds. The room was still, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. Then suddenly a knock at the door. Knock, knock. I froze. Hello, this is the police. Open the door. This is the police. Open the door. A wave of relief flooded through me. I rushed to the door, heart pounding in my chest. I glanced at my phone to make sure I hadn't missed anything. There it was. The call still connected, Rachel's voice as steady as ever. James, stay calm. They're on their way. I could hear the muffled voice of the officer outside. The door was within reach. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, ready to let in the safety of the police. But there it stood. A creature. It towered, its limbs unnaturally long, bent in sickening angles. Its black, empty eyes locked onto mine. The grin that stretched across its face was wide and chilling. I looked down at my phone in my trembling hands. The screen read, 911, what's your emergency? A smile twisted across the creature's face. It wasn't the officer. It never was. I staggered back, my blood running cold. My stomach dropped into a pit of icy dread. And then it hit me. Rachel never asked for my location. I had never been on the phone with the police. I had been talking to it the entire time.